It's 7:30 p.m. across India, live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India Global. We'll get you the top stories from India and the region. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh, and for news from rest of the world, I'm joined by my colleague in Washington, D.C., Nick Harper. Good to see you, Nick.
Good morning, Shubhendu. It's 10 a.m. here in Washington, D.C. and 3 in the afternoon across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, the US's top diplomat pushes support for Ukraine in Europe, and Israel comments after aid workers are killed in Gaza. But first, the headlines.
India's External Affairs Minister expresses optimism over permanent seat for the nation at the UN Security Council. Amidst differences with China, reiterates Arunachal Pradesh is an integral part of India. President Putin orders investigation into the concert hall attack in Russia, says it has evidence attackers had links to Ukraine. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu regrets Israel's unintended killing of aid workers in Gaza, says will ensure it does not happen again. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Paris to meet French President Emmanuel Macron. Conflicts in Ukraine, Gaza and Haiti on the agenda. Putin has said Russia will investigate last month's attack on a concert hall near Moscow that killed at least 144 people. Russia says it has evidence that attackers had links to Ukraine, even though Islamic State had claimed responsibility for the same.
Now you, together with your colleagues from other agencies, take part in investigation of the deadly terrorist attack on March 22nd. As I said earlier, it is important for us not only establish the direct perpetrators, but also all the links and chains of ultimate criminal beneficiaries of the atrocity. We will get them without any doubt.
Meanwhile, in the latest from the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu on Tuesday said its forces had captured 5 settlements, 4 in Donetsk and 1 in Zaporizhia in the last 1 month. In February, Russia claimed its first significant territorial advance in 9 months with the capture of the strategic city of Avdiivka. Shoigu stated that Russian troops continue to push back the Ukrainian formations towards the west.
Despite the lack of results on front line, Kyiv is still trying to persuade its Western sponsors that it is capable to resist the Russian army. To this effect, it is attempting to shift the combat operations to the territory of our country, using acts of terror and shelling of the civil population.
And DD India correspondent Dasha Chernysova joins us live from Moscow. Dasha, President Putin reiterates possible links of the attackers with Ukraine. What are the implications for the investigation and the ongoing conflict?
Well, certainly the Russian Federation keeps maintaining that even though the Islamic State banned in Russia claimed the responsibility for this attack, those are only the shooters, those are only those who have arranged this crime on scene here in Russia domestically. Nevertheless, Moscow keeps insisting that it keeps finding more and more evidence that links that those perpetrators did have the links with Ukraine as well as some Western countries, as the Russian officials have said before. The understanding is that those shooters have been receiving money from abroad in cash in cryptocurrency, and they were directed to Kiev to claim their reward for this attack. The Russian president on Tuesday said very clearly that all the beneficiaries of this attack would be established, and this is now the focus of the ongoing investigation. He also reiterated that the using terrorists is a double-edged sword. He said that anyone who has ordered this attack to take place has to keep that in mind. And obviously for Russia at the moment, the attack against Krakow City Hall has wider implications, not just in terms of keeping in mind that Russia is fighting not only on one front, not just in Ukraine, but also with the international terrorists, but also in other domestic issues such as migration, with Russia being dependent on migrants and having also to revise how it legalizes their presence in Russia. So the Russian president has said that only those who are willing to share the Russian culture and Russian tradition have to stay in Russia.
And what details can you share on the new territorial gains made by Russia against Ukraine?
Well, as we have heard the Russian Minister of Defense, Sergei Shoigu, giving his monthly report, he has said that Russia has made significant territorial gains, as he described it. 403 square kilometers of the territories of the so-called new territories of Russia have been, as Moscow describes it, liberated since the beginning of 2024. Those include several villages, several towns, and that have come under the Russian control. According to the Russian Ministry of Defense, Russia is advancing on all fronts. It keeps making territorial gains and continues to reduce the combat potential of the Ukrainian armed forces. Now, most recently, we've been hearing about Russia attacking the energy facilities of Ukraine, all as part of its special military operation that seeks to make sure that Ukraine has no more weapons that could actually reach the Russian Federation as well. So on Tuesday, we heard about drones attacking the Russian Republic of Tatarstan, which is 1,300 kilometers deep into the Russian territory from the border with Ukraine. So Russia insists that as Ukraine is losing the battle on the battlefield in Ukraine, they are resorting to the measures of attacking the Russian facilities deeper inside Russia in order to show to the West that they are capable of something. That's obviously the perspective of the Russian Ministry of Defense.
Dasha, thank you for those updates. And Ukrainian drones on Tuesday targeted Russia's third largest oil refinery, Tenneco, about 1,300 kilometers from the front lines in Ukraine. The attack took place in Tatarstan, a highly industrialized region southeast of Moscow, in the early hours of Tuesday, injuring at least 7 people. Meanwhile, Russian state media claims that a fire broke out at the refinery that was extinguished within 20 minutes and production has not been disrupted. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with French Defense Minister in Paris on supporting Ukraine. Nick Harper is in Washington, D.C., gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Nick, what's the latest?
Well, Shibendo, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Paris, where he's met with the French Defense Minister Sébastien Lecornu and underscored the ongoing collaboration with Europe in supporting Ukraine in its conflict with Russia. After the meeting, Antony Blinken also visited a weapons factory with the French Defense Minister in Versailles that's providing howitzer cannons to Ukraine. Later in the day, the top US diplomat is going to be meeting the French President Emmanuel Macron. Then he'll be heading to Brussels on Wednesday to attend the NATO Foreign Ministers meeting. Israel says a new Gaza truce and hostage proposal has been drafted and presented to Hamas's representatives in Cairo. On Tuesday, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office said that as part of the talks in Cairo, Israeli mediators had formulated an updated proposal for Hamas, with mediation coming from Egypt. Prime Minister Netanyahu's office added that Israel expects the mediators to push Hamas harder to try and reach a deal. Expressing condolences over the killing of aid workers in an Israeli airstrike in Gaza, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that the incident was unintentional. He added that Israel will ensure that such an incident doesn't happen again. 7 people working for the World Central Kitchen Aid Group were killed in an airstrike on Monday.
Unfortunately, in the last day, there was a tragic case of our forces unintentionally hitting innocent people in the Gaza Strip. This happens in wartime. We are thoroughly looking into it, are in contact with the governments, and will do everything to ensure it does not happen again.
Well, moving to news coming out of Finland, and a 12-year-old has killed a child and left 2 others seriously injured during a school shooting. The police have cordoned off the school building and the young suspect has been held. Finnish Prime Minister Petteri Orpo has expressed deep shock over the incident and said his thoughts were with the victims and their families. DD India's John Beaver sent us this report from Brussels.
Pupils at the school in the city of Vantaa, north of the capital Helsinki, had just returned to their classrooms after the long Easter holiday weekend. The victims were all 12 years old and believed to be classmates of the suspect. He was arrested a short time after the shooting, having fled the scene. Local police have said that he was holding a gun when he was stopped, but was arrested in a calm manner. They say he admitted to carrying out the shooting when initially questioned, and it's believed he used a gun that was licensed to a relative. The Prime Minister of Finland said the incident was deeply shocking and sent his condolences to those affected by the shooting. Finland is known as a country of hunting and gun enthusiasts. It has one of the highest number of firearms per resident in the world, with 1.5 million guns in a population of 5.5 million people. Gun ownership laws, though, have been tightened relatively recently after two deadly school shootings in 2007 and 2008. In those incidents, a total of 18 people were killed, and the law was changed so that you have to be 18 years old to own your own weapon. The police say an investigation into murder and attempted murder is now taking place. The suspect is being held by social services, as children under the age of 15 are not criminally liable in Finland. John Beaver in Brussels, reporting for DD India.
Well, several US states are holding presidential primaries this Tuesday, with President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump expected to win across the board. Voters will head to the polls in the states of Wisconsin, Connecticut, New York and Rhode Island. But some residents are planning on using the opportunity to protest against the leading candidates. DD India's Sally Patterson reports from New York City.
US President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump are the favourites in their respective primaries. Neither candidate faces a strong challenge, and they've both already secured more delegates than they need to win their party's nominations. That process will happen at their conventions in July and August. That's when the Biden-Trump rematch becomes official. But that doesn't mean it's all smooth sailing. Voters can decide to register a protest vote against Biden or Trump if they're not happy with the options. In Connecticut and Rhode Island, residents will have the option of voting uncommitted. In Wisconsin, voters can choose uninstructed delegation on their ballot. Wisconsin is a pivotal battleground state in the US, and some voters there are organising over the war in Gaza. A group of activists are aiming to show they're unhappy with Biden's ongoing support for Israel by refusing to vote for him on the ballot. But analysts warn caution in putting too much significance on Gaza when it comes to the US electorate. According to Gallup Research Group, the number of voters who list it as the nation's most important problem is under 1%. The leading key issue for voters include the economy, immigration and crime. Sally Patterson in New York, reporting for DD India.
The US and UK have announced a new partnership on artificial intelligence safety. The agreement comes amid concerns about upcoming next-generation versions of AI. US Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo and British Technology Secretary Michelle Donnellan signed a memorandum of understanding in Washington, D.C. Britain and the US are among the countries establishing a government-led AI Safety Institute. Well, staying with tech news, and Google has agreed to destroy billions of data records to settle a lawsuit claiming that it secretly tracked the internet use of people who thought that they were browsing privately. Terms of the settlement were filed on Monday in a court in the state of California. It requires approval by a judge. Lawyers for the plaintiffs valued the agreement at more than $5 billion and as high as $7.8 billion. Well, returning to one of our stories that we spoke about earlier, the killing of the 7 aid workers in an Israeli airstrike in Gaza. We're going to turn live to our correspondent in Tel Aviv, Alex Cadier, to get an update on this. Alex, I want to start by asking, what more have we heard from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu about this airstrike?
Well, Nick, he confirmed that this was an Israeli airstrike that killed those 7 aid workers. We understand 3 of which were British nationals. Now, he described it as a tragic case of our forces unintentionally hitting innocent people in Gaza. He said this happens in war and they are trying to investigate what happened and they will do everything they can to make sure it doesn't happen again. And now, Nick, we have reporting in Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, saying, giving a bit more detail of what may have happened. We understand that Israeli defense sources say that an initial convoy traveling to the warehouse with a truck on which they say an armed man was spotted by Israeli forces. Now, that convoy went into the warehouse. 3 cars went out without the truck, without the armed man. And those were the 3 cars that were struck, according to Haaretz, by that drone. Now, it was the first car was struck, then the second, then the third, in succession. So a lot of questions still to be answered about exactly what happened and why these cars, which we understand from World Central Kitchen, were very clearly branded as being part of the aid organization. We also know they were traveling on a route pre-approved by the Israeli Defense Forces. So we've heard from Prime Minister Netanyahu calling it a tragic case of unintentional striking. We've heard from Daniel Hagari, the spokesperson for the Israeli Defense Forces, expressing deep sorrow at this particular incident. We've heard the Australian Prime Minister calling for full accountability and a lot of questions asked by the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak as well. Now, that is for the incident itself, but the fact that the World Central Kitchen, because of this strike, has now suspended operations in Gaza means that tens of thousands will no longer have food readily available. That will be a big question. The other point, of course, is those ships that were being unloaded that had been carrying 400 tons of food to Gaza had to be turned around, and you have a starving population in Gaza, Nick, with 240 tons of food sailing away.
And Alex, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has just been speaking a few moments ago. He said that he's been speaking directly to Israeli authorities. He's calling for a full investigation. I also want to ask you about the truce mediation efforts briefly. What more are you hearing about the possibility of an agreement between Israel and Hamas?
Yeah, well, the latest we have is that Israeli officials have now left Cairo. They have put forward a proposal through mediators, which will now go to Hamas. We know that the last proposal, which had been put on the table by the United States, was rejected by Hamas, although it was accepted by Israel. Now, that proposal would have had 40 hostages, women, elderly and injured, released in exchange for 700 Palestinian prisoners, 100 of which are serving life sentences. Now, the issues that were outstanding, that were not resolved, was Hamas asking for the full withdrawal of Israeli troops and a lasting ceasefire, as well as the return of civilians to northern Gaza. Now, those first two, withdrawal of Israeli troops and a longer ceasefire, are deemed unacceptable to the Israeli government. They will not accept those at all. Where they have expressed flexibility, according to Israeli officials, is that they will allow more civilians to return to northern Gaza. We don't have the exact details of what that proposal contains yet, but certainly movement on those ceasefire and hostage release talks. We'll have to wait until we hear from Hamas's response to see if that movement will lead to progress, Nick.
Alex, thank you. That was Alex Carrier joining us live from Tel Aviv. Well, that's it from me here in Washington. Handing it back to you, Shemendo, in the studio.
You're joining us with those updates. And still to come on DD India Global. Election summer heating up in India. Prime Minister Modi and opposition leaders address public rallies. South Korea seeks UNESCO tag for Hanji paper.
पार्टी चाहिए। पहले चैंपियन के साथ सेल्फी लेंगे। आइडिया, यही करते हैं पार्टी। पिज्जा पार्टी। ये चल अपना कार्ड और पिन दे।
मेरे कार्ड की डिटेल्स मैं खुद ही डालूंगी। आरबीआई कहता है अपना पिन, ओटीपी, सीवीवी या इंटरनेट बैंकिंग पासवर्ड किसी के साथ शेयर ना करें। ऑनलाइन बैंकिंग सिर्फ अपने कंप्यूटर, मोबाइल और सिक्योर नेटवर्क से करें।
बाय गर्ल्स, कहाँ जा रही है? सुना नहीं, नो शेयरिंग।
आरबीआई कहता है जानकार बनिए, सतर्क रहिए।
Largest state with 80 seats.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has expressed optimism over a permanent UN Security Council seat for India. He was interacting with intellectuals in Rajkot in the West Indian state of Gujarat today.
परमानेंट मेंबरशिप कब मिलेगी? जरूर मिलेगी, जरूर मिलेगी। पर कुछ भी जो बड़ी चीज़ होती ना, बिना मेहनत के कभी मिलती नहीं, तो मेहनत भी करना पड़ेगा। अभी दुनिया में ये फीलिंग है कि यूएन बहुत कमज़ोर हो चुका है, कि यूएन की कहीं चलती नहीं है। यूक्रेन युद्ध में यूएन में डेडलॉक हो गया था। अभी जो इजराइल गाज़ा में जो चल रहा है, वहाँ भी यूएन की सहमति नहीं बनी इसमें। तो मुझे लगता है कि जैसे ये फीलिंग बढ़ता जाएगा, हमारे लिए जो सीट मिलने की संभावना जो है वो भी बढ़ती जाएगी।
And during a media interaction in Ahmedabad, Dr. Jaishankar said that Arunachal Pradesh was, is and will remain an integral part of India.
We rightly called it senseless. By doing it repeatedly, it is still senseless. So I want to be very clear. Arunachal Pradesh was, Arunachal Pradesh is, Arunachal Pradesh will always be Indian. And I hope I am saying it so clearly that not only in the country but beyond the country also people get that message very, very clearly.
Let's now get you the latest on the world's largest democratic elections in India. As the election fever grips India, political parties are intensifying their campaigns for the Grand General Elections 2024. While Bharatiya Janata Party is canvassing the works during their tenure, opposition parties are coming up with their poll promises in a bid to gain larger ground. Here's a report by DD India correspondent Dibyendu Mondal.
On Tuesday, Prime Minister Narendra Modi campaigned for the BJP in Uttarakhand's Rudrapur, part of the Nainital Udham Singh Nagar constituency, and Rajasthan's Kotputli, part of the Jaipur rural constituency.
Modi ji ko Jai Shri Ram! Adharaniya Pradhan Mantri ji ka.
Both these constituencies are going to polls in the first phase on 19th of April. The Prime Minister, during his rally on Tuesday in Uttarakhand's Rudrapur, attacked the opposition leader Rahul Gandhi for his comment that targeted the BJP.
कांग्रेस तुष्टीकरण के दलदल में ऐसा धंस गई है कि कभी देश हित का सोच ही नहीं सकती। यही कांग्रेस है जो घुसपैठियों को बढ़ावा देती है, लेकिन जब भाजपा सीएए के माध्यम से मां भारती में आस्था रखने वालों को भारत की नागरिकता देती है, तो कांग्रेस को सबसे ज्यादा तकलीफ होती है।
While BJP's senior leader and Union Home Minister Amit Shah also campaigned for the BJP throughout on Tuesday in the southern state of Karnataka, Shah, apart from addressing and meeting the BJP workers in Bengaluru, he also held a roadshow in the state as part of the party's campaign in Karnataka. The state is going to polls in two phases on the 26th of April and the 7th of May. The opposition Congress on Tuesday released a list of 17 candidates for the Lok Sabha elections. These candidates are from the states including Andhra Pradesh, Orissa, Bihar and Bengal. Apart from this, the Congress also released the list of candidates for the assembly elections of Orissa. The largest opposition party, the Indian National Congress, is also likely to release its election manifesto later this week. While the former president of the party, Rahul Gandhi, will file his nomination from the Wayanad constituency in the southern state of Kerala. As the nomination for the second phase have begun, several candidates from different political parties have started filing their nominations, while BJP candidate and actor-turned-politician Arun Govil filed his nomination today from the Meerut constituency in Uttar Pradesh. Congress's former Chief Minister of Chhattisgarh, Bhupesh Baghel, filed his nomination from the Rajnandangao constituency in the state. With the onset of April, the political parties of India have less than 3 weeks to woo voters and expand their influence before the election kickstarts on the 19th of this month. Dibyendu Mondal's report for DD India.
Let's now take a look at other stories making news around the world. Senegal's newly elected president, Bassirou Diomaye Faye, took oath of office as president during inauguration ceremony in the capital city, Dakar. Faye took the oath on Tuesday as the West African nation's fifth and youngest president. The ceremony was attended by over a dozen heads of state and regional representatives, including representatives of military juntas of Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger. A Dutch court on Tuesday heard global energy company Shell's appeal against a 2021 landmark climate ruling, which ordered it to reduce its carbon emissions by 45% by 2030. Shell contested that implementing the ruling would force it to shrink its business and would only lead customers to shift to other suppliers of fuel. South Korea is seeking a UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage of Humanity tag for its traditional mulberry paper, hanji. The hanji's light yet sturdy nature allows for easy shaping into various forms such as Buddha statues and traditional Korean wardrobes. In Tokyo, visitors and locals alike flock to catch a glimpse of the cherry blossoms before the rainy spell hits. A boat ride among the blossom-decked shores were a delight for the visitors. Beautiful cherry blossom season in Japan. That's all for this edition of DD India Global. Let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X and Instagram. You can also find us online at ddindia.co.in. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. From all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India Global. Namaskar.